It is Tuesday, April the 8th. We are live here on YouTube. One of the 15 trillion people who are doing a podcast now. Anyway, it's nice to have you aboard. And what I want to talk about today is something that I really haven't spoken about before, at least publicly. But I've said enough to people, various people, that I thought, you know what? Well, let's get it out in the open and not have to completely disintegrate the essence that is KNBR these days. That's a big word. They are so marginalized now. They are kibbles and bits, with all due respect, a non entity. And, for a time, many years ago, I started out in San Francisco radio. I was at K101, which, by the way, was not a union station. It was a powerful FM 101.3 owned by Gabbert, James Gabbert. I was coming into K101 when he sold uh, K101, Jim Gabbert, so he could buy a television station, which he made mucho dollars off of, the eventual TV 20. But the reason why I bring up the union is the fact that for many, many, many years, San Francisco, strong union affiliation, strong union city. Well, most of the radio stations, folks, they were union. KGO, KCBS, KNBR. Wasn't very lengthy, but they were union. And then you had the big stations like KOIT, Coit, and KDFC, and oh my God, KFOG. And I frequently have spoken to various people, and I've satirized and belittled, probably a little bit overdoing it, but you know what? I could tell you some of the things the little Uber drivers at KNBR, anonymously do to me, but I'm going to leave it alone for that point. I think it's abhorrent, some of the pay at KNBR. And I'm not talking about the hosts, although there's quite a bit of disjointment there too. But the fact that Cumulus is allowed to pay, basically, to some employees minimum wage. And these are people that they're not, they're one step away from being interns, and they do a lot of work, lots of work. So while you're out there ripping me and belittling me and sending me anonymous notes, KNBR employees, some of you, I actually care about the fact, well, that's not the right word. I'm sensitive to what they're allowed to get away with is Cumulus, which is why they're in another building now or anytime soon in Daly City, and why they've abandoned Broadway and Battery, where they used to have a whole bunch of radio, like 7 radio stations. But the fact that they pay a lot of these kids, and they are kids, some of them, minimum wage, and they do a crap load of work. In fact, some of them do the work as to keeping the radio station going, and they're allowed to pay minimum wage, to pay some on-air people slightly on or above around $2,000 a month to work 4-hour shifts. And you're wondering why they got rid of Tom Tolbert. Why did they get rid of John Lund? I'm not a John Lund fan whatsoever, but he made too much money. And the manner in which that was done is, quite frankly, pretty lousy. They gave him a little parting gift, KNBR, to Lund, to keep his mouth shut. Otherwise, the gravy train, the severance package that he got, would not have been as high, but subject to other things that they told, keep your mouth shut, and we'll give you a little bit better than than we're wont to do. And Tom Tolbert was the highest paid KNBR personality at roughly $400,000 a year. Now, that may be sounding like a lot of money, but the amount of money that came into KNBR based on that show, and look, the ratings had declined and so forth, but still, he was a significant part of that crew, and the advertising dollars, which are completely off the chart in a downward spiral, were still coming through. But they simply had to cut ties because those two guys made too much money. In addition, a few of their imaging people and their salespeople, but had to be let go. Now, I say this because, karma, it truly is to me, it's a very, very real term. And, I don't know right now, frankly, other than a hidden secret a slush fund that Cumulus has for some of its bigger markets, like the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, they're now down to like three stations. Well, really, two: KNBR and KSFO, which is KGO's frequency. But I don't know how they're and with the stock market thing and the tariffs and all that, the fact that they're able to exist, albeit a sliver of existence, is something to which has to be quietly put forth. I'm talking about quiet money by Cumulus, because I'm sure they don't want to jeopardize their relationship with the 49ers and now, of course, the San Francisco Giants. One more thing on that, folks. And I want to say this about as civilly as possible. What you weren't told, what you don't know, and I was able to learn from various sources on that so-called extension that you read about in the Chronicle or heard about via the trades is basically it's not even worth the paper it's written on. It was an agreement to continue under the circumstances, and the Giants get a little bit more powerful than they already are with in terms of the schedule on KNBR's airwaves. Again, keep in mind, nobody's listening to KNBR. And if they're getting any kind of help from a so-called, bounce, because the Giants got off to such a great start, that may be the case. I doubt it. Doubt it's going to be anything significant because the advertising dollars dictate, the money dictates the overall health of an operation. And there is simply no cash. And the reason why I keep saying this is because they put out such out and out BS on that extension. As I predicted, they kind of had to be in a situation where the Giants needed them and they needed the Giants just for overall existence. But that's it. There's no lucrative radio rights in terms of dollars. It's all pretty much, there might be some potential revenue enhancements. And if such and such, in terms of advertising, hits a certain score, then they'd have to, and this is only a token amount of money to the Giants because the Giants need them to build the baseball schedule, day by day promotion operation, that kind of a thing. That's why they're going to have a million different post-game show hosts, not just FP Santangelo, who is truly brutal, and JT Snow, an up-and-comer. I think he's pretty good. At least he's starting to be. And it's just not the same, folks. The revenue is no longer there. The revenue wasn't there before the Giants came. It was depreciating to the little revenue that they had significant advertisers break away because advertisers are soon, not so much now, they know that radio is really not a successful conduit. Why do you think this emphasis on streaming and internet and every other thing except radio? It's difficult. You have legit stations in the bigger markets like New York, like Philly, like Chicago, Miami, Houston, the Bay Area. It just ain't happening. And I'm not proud of that. I'm not ecstatic that the radio business in the Bay Area has turned into a torment. And here's something even bigger. I'm going to repeat this. You KNBR employees, if you can use that term, I wish you could make a living. I wish you didn't need to rely upon your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend in order to continue to do what I guess apparently you love, and that's to work at a radio station. But you can't live on that. You can't subside on that. And years ago, even though it was still that same sort of financial framework, but it wasn't as bad as it is today, you at least had some protection and you had a union. No longer. And I'm just, and I say this with no sarcasm, for the sanctity of radio here, Giants better hope that KNBR Cumulus doesn't crash and burn. It could very well do so. They've moved to these new offices in Daly City, not exactly the zeitgeist of culture and opportunity, but they had to. They couldn't afford the lease at 750 Battery, and their ability to pay basic bills has been compromised, which is why they were determined to get rid of people on the air, where they're now down to basically 6 or 5 on air. That's it. And why they don't have hospitalization like they're required to do if they were a union station. Oh, they might have some limited plan. It's nothing like it used to be. They are on a trajectory to lose money, like Cumulus is losing money, hemorrhaging money. I don't wish that on anybody because collectively for the industry, it's not good. And it also is full evidence of just how difficult the radio situation is here in the Bay Area. The Giants affiliation, even the 49ers, doesn't help the situation. Doesn't burden it, but doesn't help. That's all I can say now. But whatever's the case, I hope you're having a great Tuesday. Stay in touch. Email me. You have my email. And do subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. See you later.